Welcome to Cinepro, where we bring your favorite movies back to life with quick recaps, hidden details, and everything you missed. The movie begins in New York in a building called the Millennium Building, which has 102 floors and 73 elevators. On the rooftop, security guards Andy and Gary were watching their neighbors having a rooftop party through a telescope. When it started raining, the guards went inside before the lightning caused a power outage. Andy went to the bathroom, while Gary noticed the clock acting strangely at the same time the elevator doors opened, and thunder was crashing outside. Gary tried to keep the elevator doors open, but suddenly his flashlight turned on by itself. When he tried to turn it off, the door started shaking with his hand. At that moment, the elevator door closed, and Andy heard Gary screaming. When Andy went to him, he found Gary holding his broken flashlight and blaming the elevator. Scared of it, Andy dismissed it as nonsense and forced Gary to go back with him. The next day, a group of pregnant women finished a yoga session and entered the elevator. They noticed it was descending faster than usual. Suddenly, the elevator stopped. The guards heard the alarm and noted it was the second time this week, but they never found anything wrong with the elevator. The alarm stopped suddenly, and the guards assumed the elevator was working again, so they didn't continue the maintenance. However, the elevator was still stuck. When the women tried pressing the emergency buttons or using the phone, nothing worked. Their phones had no signal either, so they had to wait. Meanwhile, the guards received a call from another tenant saying the elevator wasn't working, which surprised them because the lights on their computer showed everything was fine. Inside the elevator, the women were losing patience because it was extremely hot and hard to breathe. When the maintenance team arrived, the guards cut the power so the technicians could open the door, but even the key didn't work. At that moment, the women accidentally triggered the alarm very loudly. At least two of them started having contractions. Within minutes, all the women were experiencing labor pains, and one of them actually began giving birth. The maintenance team announced that the door was stuck. Gary arrived with a hammer, wanting to help, because one of the women was his wife. The technician warned him it was very dangerous and tried to stop him, leading to a scuffle on the ground. At that moment, the elevator started descending rapidly, even though the power was still off. When the elevator reached the bottom, the guards opened the doors and were shocked to find babies inside. Meanwhile, technicians Jeff and Mark were having breakfast at a cafeteria. Mark confronted a rude man who was mistreating the waiter, and the man retaliated by throwing him onto a table before leaving. Their breakfast was interrupted by a call from their manager, instructing them to go to the Millennium Building to fix the elevator. At the same time, reporter Jennifer was sent to the Millennium Building to cover the incident involving the pregnant women, who were being taken away in ambulances. Jennifer tried to ask the mothers some questions, but the police stopped her. When Mark and Jeff arrived, they discussed the elevator issues. Manager Milligan wanted them to fix it quickly, fearing lawsuits. Mark and Jeff were taken to the motor room on the rooftop. While inspecting the motor, they talked about a mechanic who had allegedly taken his own life. One of them speculated that the motor might have been struck by lightning, but Jeff dismissed the idea as ridiculous. After several hours of inspection, they found nothing wrong and left. Meanwhile, a blind man was at a hair salon where the stylist dyed his hair green. It turned out he had been exploiting his blindness to behave inappropriately. Later, as revenge, she let him leave with the green hair. The blind man and his guide dog entered the elevator and chose to descend, but the elevator started going up instead. It stopped at the 91st floor, which was still under construction and empty, meaning no one could have pressed the button. The man pressed several buttons, but the elevator wouldn't respond, so he got out. The doors closed immediately, and the elevator descended without him. The man called for another elevator, which made the dog bark. The elevator ascended rapidly, and when the screen announced the 91st floor, the doors opened to reveal an empty shaft. The dog barked to warn its owner, who took a step and fell. He managed to grab onto the edge, and the dog tried to pull him out, but his weight was too much, and they both fell down the elevator shaft. That night, on the 44th floor, Andy and Gary were stealing whiskey. When they received a call from the surveillance cameras, their colleague explained that the elevator was ascending rapidly, even though no one was supposed to be in the building at that time. The elevator eventually stopped and opened its doors, but no one came out. Gary and Andy tried to investigate but accidentally knocked over a statue, causing a loud noise that made the elevator doors close and leave. The two went downstairs and found the elevator open again on the 40th floor, but it closed as they approached. A small screen showed it was returning to the 44th floor. When Gary's flashlight started malfunctioning, the doors opened without the elevator arriving. Andy entered to investigate, and found the blind man's dog hanging from a metal beam. At that moment, the doors closed and grabbed Andy by the neck. Gary tried to help, but the doors were stuck. Suddenly, the elevator car descended, pushing Andy downward until his neck was severed by the edge. The next day, the Millennium Building shut down all its elevators, leaving hundreds of tourists stranded outside. The press was banned from entering, and the police refused to share any information. Milligan held a meeting with the detective assigned to the case, who explained that they had reviewed the surveillance footage, but couldn't find any intruders in the building. Mark and Jeff were called to inspect the elevators again, but Mark had a headache and went to the bathroom to vomit. There he encountered Jennifer, who was disguised as a cleaning worker. Mark recognized her as a reporter. She took his photo and asked him some questions, but he refused to answer. When he exited the bathroom, Jennifer tried to follow him, but the guards escorted her out. Later, Mark and Jeff reported to Milligan that they couldn't find anything wrong. With the detective's support, Milligan announced they would reopen the elevators. The next day, when Mark arrived at work, his colleagues teased him about something in the newspaper. Mark was confused and was called into the manager's office, where the manager was furious because the newspaper had printed a provocative headline with Mark's photo. Jennifer had included a sarcastic comment from Mark about the elevators, and now the police considered him a suspect. Mark was also shocked to learn he'd been assigned a new partner. Looking out the window, he saw Jeff arguing with a scientist named Gunter. Mark asked his new partner about the mechanic who had died, and learned he had been Jeff's partner. Elsewhere in the city, two friends were rollerblading. Without caring that they were bumping into people or cars, they finally arrived at the Millennium Building garage. One of them accidentally got hit by a car, while the other kept walking in the dark. The man who got hit was checking his wound. At that moment, all the car wipers started moving simultaneously, and the elevator door opened with a strong light inside. I saw a man inside. Minutes later, they shot up to the 80s. The corpse flew into the room, broke the window, passed over the railing, and then fell from the building, dying upon impact with the ground. Mark saw the incident on the news, and immediately headed to the Millennium Building, but no one allowed him to enter. On his way back, he saw Jennifer with other reporters, and followed her. She waited to finish her article and shared details about the incident. She explained that the police believed the man jumped to kill himself, but she suspected foul play. In the lobby, a little girl managed to escape from the daycare, and started playing in front of the elevators. Suddenly, an elevator door opened, and when the girl approached, it quickly shut. Another elevator door opened, and this kept happening for a while, with the girl enjoying running from one door to another. When the middle elevator opened, the elevator car rose slightly, leaving a gap underneath. The girl looked inside. At that moment, the teacher and Milligan heard her scream and rushed to the lobby to check. Luckily, the girl was fine, but her doll was destroyed. When Milligan looked at the elevator, he found the doll's arm stuck in the door. That night, Mark was studying the elevator schematics at home. He heard a noise outside, noticed a shadow behind the door, grabbed a bat, and opened it. He found Jennifer, who brought him a video to watch. It was security footage of the skaters' incident. Mark thought it proved the man killed himself, but Jennifer rewound the video to show him the timing. The elevator took only 2 seconds to travel from the garage to the 86th floor, which was impossible under normal conditions. Mark finally agreed that something strange was going on, and took Jennifer to visit Jeff, who hadn't answered his phone. Jennifer asked him to watch the video, but Jeff freaked out, yelled at them, and stormed off. This wasn't his usual behavior. When his wife came out of the house, she confirmed that Jeff had been acting strange lately. Jennifer and Mark left, and decided to have dinner together. Jennifer admitted she thought the elevator was haunted. After dinner, they went to Jennifer's office, and used her computer to search for information about Gunter, the designer of the building's elevator. It turned out he had worked for Codlit Corporation, which shut down after investigations into bribery and illegal use of government funds. Another article revealed that the company had been working with the military to develop weapons. At that moment, Jennifer's colleague Chip walked by them, and noticed the article they were reading. He shared what he knew. Codlit Corporation had faced issues for creating biochips, computer chips made from living tissue. They had built a computer using dolphin brains, which evolved on its own, and the chips started replicating themselves. The entire computer grew and behaved like a living organism, but no one knew what happened to it. Chip didn't mention Gunter, but agreed to help them look for information. On their way home, Jennifer told Mark she still thought the elevator was haunted. The next day, Milligan entered the elevator, and drops of blood fell on his shoulder. When he looked up, he saw the hatch open. Suddenly, the elevator stopped, and Jeff's body fell through the hatch. Milligan was terrified and crawled out, but soon other employees saw the body. Mark received a call with the bad news, and rushed with Jennifer to get details. To their shock, Gunter was sitting at the table with Milligan, the investigator, and Mark's boss. The investigator explained that Jeff had been a suspect, and now they were sure he was involved in all the incidents. He also claimed the police had received a message from the killer, Mark knew he was lying. When Jennifer tried to ask Gunter about the biochips, he stopped her, believing their knowledge of the subject would make them look like suspects too. The two left the building, and Mark suspected the police were helping Milligan cover everything up. He also told Jennifer about Jeff's former partner, and said he was starting to think the story of his suicide was a lie. Later they went to Jeff's house to search for evidence, but the police had taken everything. His wife said Jeff had died in the same way as his partner, confirming that the suicide story was a lie. Afterward, Jennifer and Mark visited the widow of Jeff's partner, but she didn't open the door. Jennifer picked the lock with a pin. When they entered, they found a strange swimming pool, built for the deceased man. The widow finally agreed to talk, and said her husband was murdered when they left him bleeding inside the building for 3 days. She believed his spirit was still there, and wouldn't rest until justice was served. At the Millennium Building, a large group of people entered an elevator, which began ascending rapidly without stopping at any of the selected floors. Everyone started crying and screaming in panic. One of the kids wet himself. Suddenly, the floor opened, and a group of people fell to their death. Some managed to hold on, but the elevator kept rising at an incredible speed, and one by one, they started falling. The elevator didn't stop, and eventually burst through the roof, destroying half of the engine room. The incident reached the White House, where the president held a press conference, declaring that all elevator deaths were acts of terrorism. At the same time, the head of the elevator company met with Gunter, and told him that since he created this monster, it was now his responsibility to kill it. Back at the Millennium Building, there was an increased police presence. As part of an official operation, Jennifer arrived in Jeff's car, and Mark hid behind the corner of the car in front of the building. She disguised herself as a company employee, delivering elevator-related materials for the investigation, but the police still wanted to search the car. At that moment, Jennifer received a call from someone who told her the biochip project was still ongoing and operational, and now they were using humans instead of animals. The police grew tired of Jennifer stalling for time, and forced her to end the call before locking her in a room. Meanwhile, Mark slipped out of the car unnoticed, entered the building by crawling under a police car, and while the police were unloading crates of ammunition and explosives, Mark carefully moved, opened a service elevator with his key, and jumped on top of the car before the police used it to reach the top floor. When the coast was clear, Mark climbed the stairs, avoiding a few officers before entering the engine room, and there he used his key again to operate one of the main elevators, which the guards saw on the main computer. After taking the marked bulb, he returned to the last floor and entered the main elevator, before the police could see him. At first, nothing happened, but when Mark touched the opening, the elevator started descending rapidly. Using the buttons was of no use, and Mark caused a short circuit in the elevator to finally stop it. After that, Mark climbed on top of the elevator, and used the buttons there to control it. He went up a few floors and stopped the elevator, when he noticed a mysterious message, written in blood on the wall. Mark looked into the shaft, and was startled when a bird flew out of it, but there was nothing else, so he started ascending the elevator again. After a few floors, he found a strange white substance in another shaft, and sparks on the wires above. When he tried to climb higher, the police arrived at the engine room, and shut off the elevator. Now, Mark had no choice but to climb up the wire. He discovered a room in the wall and forced it open, which caused the box in the engine room to shake and emit sparks. Inside the room, he found the large glowing biochip. Without much thought, he began stabbing it repeatedly. At the same time, the box in the engine room activated and started descending. The biochip wasn't dead yet, so Mark continued attacking it. The police used explosives to blow open the elevator door, and began entering, intending to capture Mark. The fiery box was approaching, so Mark moved away to avoid being killed. Most of the officers managed to escape quickly, but one of them tripped, leaving his legs hanging over the edge. The box sliced his body in half as it descended. Mark prepared to escape, but another elevator rose, causing wires to wrap around his legs and drag him along. Using all his strength, Mark managed to free himself from the wires, and jumped before the elevator crashed into the engine room. The debris started falling, and Mark had to hide under a ledge to survive. At that moment, Gunter arrived at the building, and was allowed entry because he had special authorization. The operation leader recognized him from the camera, and realized he wasn't connected to the terror. Meanwhile, Jennifer entered the vents to escape the room, and Mark exited the elevator, stealing a weapon from the police crates. Then he went to the 65th floor, opened the elevator door, and found the biochip again. He prepared to shoot, but Gunter appeared beside him with a weapon. Mark quickly disarmed him, and they started fighting. Gunther tried to push Mark into the elevator shaft and was about to win the fight, but Jennifer interrupted them, grabbed the weapon, and forced him to surrender. Mark took the opportunity to grab the officer's weapon again, but Gunther blocked the door to protect his invention. At that moment, the police arrived, and Gunther took the chance to grab Jennifer as a hostage. She bit his hand to free herself. When Gunther was left alone, the elevator wires began moving like an octopus to grab, drag, and kill him. Mark's leg got caught in the wires, so Jennifer threw him the weapon, which he used to finally destroy the biochip. The explosion threw Mark back into the corridor, and the wires released Gunther's corpse. Sometime later, Jennifer went to pick Mark up from the hospital after he recovered. They rode the elevator, and were surprised when it suddenly stopped. But it turned out Mark had accidentally pressed the emergency button. And that's the end of the movie. See you in another summary, and thank you for watching.